Hello and welcome to Ask George after day two of the third test between Pakistan and England from Rawalpindi. Our chief correspondent George Dobell is on hand to answer all your questions, all your queries, all your problems are on contract. Agony Aunt is here.
All your problems?
Okay. I think you're doing yourself a disservice.
If anyone has money problems or doubts about their sexuality or just no, I'm so not the guy. Anyway,
Well, look, we don't discriminate. We take any questions.
okay, let's have more of those. Did you see how many people were asking about whether I was going to do OnlyFans?
No, as a
Maybe it's
rule,
just
I
a
just try
smoking
and block those out. But please elaborate.
Well, no, it's just I was surprised. I'm quite surprised that someone in the cricketer commercial department hasn't tried to persuade me.
Did you? Oh, you don't read your emails then?
I don't. But right, I
Different
can unbutton
conversation.
one more button. What do you think? It's more
um,
likely they're going to want me to wear a balaclava. Right.
once again, we're doing our best to distract ourselves from the job in hand, but no matter. Before we get to the questions we've had, and naturally we've had a lot of questions England related, as we often do, around particularly when England their fortunes are perhaps not as um, positive as they may wish them to be. Let's just talk a little bit about what Pakistan did well today quickly before we face some of those questions. We talk about some of those questions and how they turned around a day that at 177 for seven, I think, or something in that region. They're still quite a way behind from parity. England look at it in that long morning session. How they went about turning it around into a place now where you would be somewhat surprised if they let it slip from here. How good were they today?
Pakistan have been terrific for 10 days or so. We know they gambled in the second test, but they brought in two spinners who have bowled really well, really cleverly, and they've exploited England's issues against spin. At the same time, in this game, they lost the toss, huge disadvantage for them, and they've overcome it. Now, Shakil's played a really classy, sort of old-fashioned innings in a way,
Mm.
but just what was required. He has worked the bowling around. He's nudged it. He's nurdled it, and Sajid in particular has come in to this series like a whirlwind, like a breath of fresh air. He's tough not to like, even when he's smashing England bowling everywhere. And he's been brilliant, hasn't he? And the same with Noman Ali. I mean, Noman maybe isn't quite as flamboyant, but he's a really good cricketer. And so they played differing roles. Look, those two took a bit of a chance maybe, and it came off, but they played really good cricket. So they've outplayed England in this game in particular. And, if they go on to win it, they deserve a huge amount of praise for turning around the series because they had a terrible first test. So, all the praise in the world. And I suppose a reminder that there are different ways of playing Test cricket. As I say again, Shakil's innings somewhat old-fashioned, frustrated England, and exposed what we know are their weaknesses, which is playing spin bowling, and to some extent delivering it. I thought England bowled okay, but they haven't bowled anywhere near as well as Pakistan have bowled. And of course, both tests, some big chances have gone down, which is what I've written about today. To be fair, I think that Jamie Smith had a very tough chance today behind the stumps. But Shakil was on 26, I think, and he, look what he finished with in an innings where no one else gets 50. That's a massive moment. So it's two tests in a row that a chance has gone down behind the stumps, which has been huge. I think England would have lost the second test anyway, without that over where England missed two chances off cast, but Smith missed a really simple one in the second test, and today he's missed a very tough one. Now, the thing is, lots of keepers would have missed today. It wasn't even a drop, I don't think. I don't think he touched it. It hit him rather than the other way around. But, England do have a fella sitting at home, or whatever he's doing, in Ben Folkes, who is about as good at keeping spin bowling. But Adam Gilchrist actually said he was the best he'd ever seen to spin bowling. And what he was really good at doing in India, as we saw again and again, was staying low, getting those low balls on under edges he was taking in India. Fantastic stuff. And England have made a decision to go with Jamie Smith's superior batting, and that's absolutely fine. He is a better batter. But my piece today is about the other options that are there. It doesn't have to be Smith or Folkes, but I think that Folkes might have made a big difference today. So there's quite a lot of things, as ever. But you're right, focus and ask about Pakistan, because they've done brilliantly and they deserve a huge amount of credit for it.
Yeah, and you can read that piece on the Cricketers digital channels, on the app, online. It'll be all over social media as well. We've got a £1 offer, as will be you'll be pointed towards in the middle of this video as well.
£1 for a month.
Pound.
It's incredible.
Unbelievable. So well worth your time, because I think there'll be an awful lot of criticism, as we perhaps will allude to in the second part of this video, of England. But George hasn't just rolled out the hits, has very much looked at what can potentially change to reflect what has gone wrong, rather than just, as is quite the easy thing to do, perhaps to size England up and take chunks out of them. So you can read that at the moment. Let's move on to some of your questions, though, and some interesting ones. Occidental Tourist asks, how can anyone from outside England's siege mentality camp get them to recognise the need for some introspection and selection changes? Really interesting one.
Yeah, I think that's a well put point. I think they're quite inflexible. I think they're quite stubborn. And actually, if this test goes the way it looks as if it is, they'll have lost 6 out of 7 away from home, and 6 out of 7 in Asia. And here's an interesting thing, because I was annoyed at the end of the India series by people saying, in fact, I can tell you, I was in a pub with Jonathan Trott, and someone said to us, no one wins in India. And he and I sort of looked at each other, and he was thinking, I could tell he was thinking, they do, because the side that he was in did win there. And we're just about, I think, to see a New Zealand side do the same thing. You can win. If you go into it with the mentality that you can't, you've got a problem. I mean, it's blooming tough. Obviously, it would be one of the most amazing series results that you can think of if New Zealand pull this off. But it is a reminder that it can be done. And I think England made some mistakes, and it still annoys me. And it still annoys me how passive people were about it. So I think there is a siege mentality. I think that's quite well put. And I think they need to look at it again. They need to, the idea, I mean, how patient are they going to be with Ollie Pope? It's now 12 innings he's had, in which he's passed 30 once. I mean, the stats are in my piece, but he's averaging something like 23 since February in 13 tests. It's a long time. I don't think he's a number 3. I don't think he is cut out for that role. He could have been a number 5 or 6, but there are other people doing that. I mean, he's played 52 tests now, and he's averaging 33. We were very, very much in Graham Hick territory, aren't we? But he's not playing against the quality of teams Graham Hick did, and he's been given all those tests basically in a row. He has been dropped, but he's played a lot of tests in a row. And yes, I think that at the moment England looked, to give you a Bob Dylan line, they're locked in tight but out of range. They've got their strategy for the Ashes, but it's not a good one. I don't think they can win the Ashes if they go with Ollie Pope at 3. I'd love him to prove me wrong. I think he's a terrific guy. I thought he was a good leader. I get why they like his leadership. I like his leadership. But you've got to score some bloody runs. That matters too. And the same goes for Ben Stokes.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have the first Bob Dylan quotes quite this late into the video, but there we are. I just wonder, just returning to the question in a little bit, in that, who's the dissenting voice? Who's going to step up and say, okay, this isn't necessarily right. We need a change, or is everyone just singing on the, or is everyone, to sort of use a sort of political analogy, is everyone on the same side of the house talking to no one?
Does anyone say to Ben Folkes, I'm not sure about that, Ben. Now, look, Ben Folkes is obviously fantastic. He's a brilliant cricketer with bat and ball and in the field. He's done amazing things for English cricket. He is the natural leader of the side. He's an inspirational figure. So I'm not, you know, but we all need someone to say to us sometimes, do you know what, Nick? Do you know what, George? Think again about that. We all need that. We all need that. And I don't know that he's got anyone doing that anymore. The man's too big. The man's too strong. There you are, another one. That was about Bob Dylan. That was a Mark Knopfler line, I think.
No.
We all need someone to say, do you want to think about that again? I don't know that that's happening. I think Ben Folkes did after the loss in Wellington. But I don't know that many people are. And there are always different ways of doing things. And do you know something else that disappoints me a bit? Whenever they need a number 3 or an opener, they always shove the most inexperienced or the most pliable. How about the senior players do the tough gig? How about that? That's one of the reasons I respect Pope so much. The other day, they needed an opener. He was captain. He stuck his hand up and did the job. It's the right thing to do. It's the obvious thing to do. But we don't always see it happen. I don't know if there are questions about. Go on. Sorry, you go.
Let's move on just ever so slightly, because we're gonna run into some other road here. I don't want to sort of cramp on the questions of some others that we've got. Let's move to a different part of the. Let's move to a wider question, another wider question from Scott Wellstead, and it's: given the amount of competitive cricket lately, coupled with some unexpected results, has the moaning during the English summer about one-sided tests and the state of the game proved to be misplaced? I think we can take that question how we'd like to. I think.
Yeah, well, as ever, I don't think so. I think it's still a great game. Was that Scott who asked that?
Yeah,
still a great of the games. And what we're seeing in Pakistan now, to some extent, but India mainly, is a reminder of that. And so it's still a great game. But no, I think it would be foolish of us. I think it'd be naive of us if we convinced ourselves that a couple of good weeks for Test cricket means that it's all right. It's really not. The alarm bells are ringing. And it's increasingly difficult. But what New Zealand? I mean, New Zealand had an amazing couple of weeks in there as a country as a whole in cricketing terms, and it's been very much against the run of play, if you like. I mean, the women's side in the English summer looked. Well, they weren't at the races, were they?
No.
So it's an amazing thing that's happened, but I don't think it makes everything all right, and I don't think we should slip into that just because it's been an amazing couple of weeks.
Kenny asks, when are we going to address England's inability to remove the tail cheaply? Well, let's address it now. Sky put up a really interesting graphic at the back end of their coverage. I think it's 7 partnerships that Pakistan have put together in this series beyond the 7th wicket that have been worth 49 or more, including I think there is a century in there as well. But I think it's a wider problem than just this series. I think this has been a Stokes. This has definitely been a Stokes problem. It was a bit of a root problem as well. I think as well. Where does it come from?
It's a good question. I mean, I do think today, again, I would want to give Pakistan some credit. Those guys batting down the bottom, Noman and Sajid, they can back, aren't they? So I'd start with that. What do you want in those situations? You want a spinner with bite or a bowler with pace. Don't have that massively, do they? Rahan is a leggy, but he's not a leggy in the classic sense of someone who, well, in the Shane Warne sense of someone who turns it absolutely miles or anything like that. And also maybe he should have bowled a bit more and a bit earlier. But I think England's tactics sometimes can be frustrating, particularly when they go to the short ball too quickly, too readily. I don't think that wasn't the issue today. I thought today they played well, but there's maybe a little bit of a lack of bite in the attack sometimes. I thought what they were crying out for today was the second seamer.
Mm.
I thought it would really, really have helped for Ben Stokes to have bowled. Maybe he's not as all right as he's been making out, but I'm not sure that today was particularly typical. Sometimes they've gone a bit impatient to change the tactics, But there's a lot of reasons. They're not the only team in the world to have struggled with it to some extent. When the ball gets softer, lower order, there aren't very many proper rabbits at the bottom of batting lineups anymore. But the fact is that they have got the worst record in the world for it, and it's one that they would want to look at. So I haven't got you a really good answer, but generally, if you had a really good leggy or a really good fast bowler, you would have brought them on in those situations.
Okay, well, that brings an end to part one. In part two, we're going to ask the immortal question, are England just a little bit average?
Subscribe to The Cricketer for a special offer price of just £1 a month to gain access to all my reports from Pakistan and all the news and analysis from the award-winning cricketer team.
Welcome back to part two. Mike's going to kick us off with a pretty direct question. How good are England, George? Right now, they feel like an average team.
I don't think they're average at all. I think they're a fairly extraordinary team, but they're just not that good. I mean, the criticism about them being they're pretty good, but where are they in the World Test Championship table?
Yeah.
Well, that tells you something. The criticism about them being flat track bullies is obviously simplistic, but it's not rubbish, is it? I mean, they are murderously good, just like that ODI side up until the 2019 World Cup on flat wickets. Brilliant. I think they're also pretty good on green seamers. But it'll be really, really interesting to see how they play on real quick ones in Australia. And I think the evidence is already in for how they play on turning wickets. Now, they're not going to play on turning wickets again for a couple of years. So I don't suppose anyone will do anything to change any of these problems. English cricket will, I don't know, nick a win here or there. If it beats India and Australia, they'll think that, well, they'll probably be right, that everything's okay. But it's looking unlikely right now, isn't it? Be really interesting to see what sort of surfaces we get for the India series. So look, are they an average side? They're not, because they're doing extraordinary things in the game. They're doing things. Look, I know a lot of people love to hate England, but come on, acknowledge it. They've done some things in batting in particular that we've not seen before. And one of them was 2 weeks ago. So these things are pretty amazing. So I wouldn't say they're average. I would say that they're a lot of fun to watch. They've had some really great results, but they're frustrating and they're probably not quite as good as they think they are. But, I'm always a bit loath to say that because someone will clip it up and, I'll have another aggressive conversation with someone in the England side with whom I'm staying in the same hotel. And taken out of context, it sounds harsher than I actually mean it, but they're not the best side in the world. There's still some progress to be made. Isn't it weird, though, that there's all that progress to be made? And if you go through English cricket and all the world-class, absolutely top players in English cricket, who in English cricket is the best at what they do in the world? Ben Foakes is a name that I would throw in there very, very quickly. And I think he would have made a difference in this series.
Yeah, speaking of England, obviously don't go back to the subcontinent for another sort of 2.5 years. I don't suspect, one doesn't suspect that in 2026 there's going to be some sort of call out to try and get a battery of spinners to go over to Bangladesh and try and win that series in the same way that they are laying down the groundwork for an Ashes tour next year or later this year, next year even. Let's just move on to one question that we've had a lot of, and we touched upon a little bit, is can we have a serious discussion about Ollie Pope? And that's from Alfie. Let's try and move this on a little bit in terms of, I think you made yourself perfectly clear in terms of where you see him at the moment. What's the direction of travel? What do you think the direction of travel should be around what England do with Ollie Pope? And more importantly, what Ollie Pope does around trying to recapture what is undoubtedly has been some good form in Test cricket, just not there at the moment.
When he made a century in Gurkha, Port Elizabeth as it used to be known, Joe Root got runs as well, and Pope outplayed him. And I spoke to various people who I trust and respect about these things, and asked about what weaknesses they could see in Ollie Pope's game, and none of us really could. So partly we were just wrong, but partly I think he was over-promoted. I don't think he was a number 3, and I don't think it helped him to be made vice-captain. I think it was maybe too much responsibility when he was still trying to bed into the side. And now he pushes at the ball with hard hands. He didn't used to. He looks nervous, frenetic, as if he's doubting himself. He looks like he's got to bat more aggressively than he actually should. I think he's naturally an accumulator with a lovely array of natural strokes in the Ian Bell mould. And he's trying to be more of a dasher. So I think he's been moulded to be something he's not quite. And I don't think it's helped him. And they did that because they wanted him to bat 3 because the senior players didn't want to, which is okay up to a point. But just like, I don't know, Dan Lawrence's Test career has probably been screwed by batting out of position, I fear that Ollie Pope's has been too. So I see a lot of ability in Ollie Pope, but I think he's had quite a prolonged run at number 3. And it's diminishing returns rather than increasing. So, there are some stats in my piece. You can look at them. I think actually his long-term batting average is down to 33. At 3, it's about 40. But in recent times, it's substantially lower than that. There are other options. Personally, I don't think England are getting the best out of Ben Stokes. Well, they're not. He's barely bowling and hasn't done for a sustained period of time, 2 years and more. And actually, he's not scored very many runs. His average at 6 since the Ashes is 22, I think. I think he's a brilliant batter. I think he's a high-class player with bat and ball, actually. The bowling may have gone because of the body. Don't know. Hope not. But the batting hasn't. He's better than he's showing. And I understand that he's very often trying to make statements rather than runs. But I think we could get more out of him. I think England could get more out of him if he were put in the position where actually he batted more normally, where he batted without thinking so much about about accelerating, about the context of the game. He just batted. Now, he's got a fantastic technique and ability against fast bowling. I mean, absolutely brilliant. And I'll give you a few examples. He has made 3 fourth-inning centuries against Australia. And I would argue that they were all great Test innings. There was one at Lord's fairly recently, a ridiculous, furious innings. There was the one at Leeds, which was a miracle. But maybe old-fashioned style, classy innings. The first one in Perth was the best of the lot, I would argue, maybe.
Yeah.
Brilliant innings. He could really play fast bowling. I actually believe in him against spin. I just think he's out of practice. But we're not actually seeing him contribute to the side as the great cricketer I believe he is. And I do mean that. I think he's a great cricketer. I just think there might be a way of unlocking that. And that way, Smith could maybe move up to 6. And Ben Foakes could bat at 7. Yep. Now, Ben Foakes cannot do what Jamie Smith did yesterday. But Jamie Smith can, because he's at 6. And then, Joe Root clearly doesn't want to bat at 3. We've been there. We've tried that. So Joe Root can stay at 4. Harry Brook can stay at 5. Anyway, there are different ways of doing things. But I am a bit worried about the keeping of Jamie Smith. It's not a one-off. He's missed a couple of stumpings now. He's missed a chance standing back. He's missed some chances standing up. He might be okay, but he's not Ben Foakes. And it is entirely possible that that's been the turning point of the series. So there are different things you could do. Ollie Pope, it's not, he can come back if he's been dropped. Other players have been dropped. He looks to me as if he needs to go and rediscover his game. I don't think his technique's good. I don't think it's good. And I think that actually going back to Surrey, playing some county cricket, learning to score runs again, I don't think that's such a bad thing. It needn't be the end of the world. But I'm sure if you ask me what will happen, I'm pretty confident he'll go to New Zealand. They're pretty flat wickets. I mean, Hamilton's as flat as it gets in the world, I think. And he's good enough to turn it around. And I kind of hope he does. I think he's a really good player and a good fella. So I just would be extremely worried about him going out at number 3 in the Ashes. And to be honest, the English summer, if he is number 3 against Bumrah and Mohammad Shami, I mean, that's about as hard as it will ever get. And no, I'm not confident he's got the game for it.
Just finally, before we sign off, what's your sense of how tomorrow, day 3, may or may not unfold?
Well, Joe Root's still there, isn't he? I mean, Harry Brook's a very good player. Jamie Smith he showed what he can do. It's absolutely not over. And I don't think Ben Stokes is in form at all. But who's not seen him pull off miracles before? England are way behind this game. Pakistan are strong favourites, but it's definitely not over. But there's every chance it could be a three day test. Pakistan are strongly on top. I mean, I probably don't need to say any more. But the one thing I did notice looking at the stats throughout the day, there are stats now about how the pitch is playing and how it's deteriorating. I think of all the stats I've seen in cricket, they might be the most rubbish.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just when wickets go down, they say, "Oh, it's a 7.4," and when they're not, it's not. It's not changing that much. It's not that capricious. It's not. It's just I guess that I don't think the keeping stats are very good either. I think I've been sort of talking to people on Twitter about this. If a keeper stands there and doesn't go for one that rushes past them between them and first slip, it doesn't count as a drop. Well, it should, shouldn't it? The data isn't always reliable. Anyway, it'll be fun tomorrow, but I think Pakistan are in a very strong position. And most cricket lovers, I think, as I say, it's pretty hard not to warm to Sajid and Noman in particular. However disappointed England supporters might be if England lose, the bigger picture is Pakistan kind of needed this. And, England will bounce back and, life goes on.